All right, we are still counting down my top 100 games. We got a ways to go. This is 70 to 61. Hey, I'm Will. This is Cardboard Minute. This is a channel where we like to play solo games, do some reviews, do some playthroughs. Sometimes we have some guests on for multiplayer and or discussions. I love just going into the discussions of board gaming as well. I try not to just do only the hotness, partially because I'm in Canada and we get games far behind anyone else. But I'm just doing this because I love the games. I love sharing games. And I want to share with you my top 100. I've never done this before. And it's been an exciting journey already. And there's still plenty left to go. And then we'll finish off the end, the top 20, with some of my friends who will be in studio here with me. We are at number 70, and that is Earth. This is a relatively new game. I do love my tableau building card games, engine building. You are, each turn, like on your turn rather, you select an action type. You get the better action. Everyone else gets the lesser action of that type. Rinse and repeat until someone has filled in their tableau. You are getting just an absolute ton of cards in this game. I don't think I've seen a game that mills through cards so quickly as this one. You are adding cards to your tableau with adjacencies. You are growing trees on them, which are these little wooden stacking trees up to their maximum. You're growing seeds on them, or these like leaf cubes. And then you're getting dirt, you're spending dirt to get more stuff. You're playing events like thunderstorms and whatnot to trigger one-time events. Stuff is composting, and of course there's things that score off of everything. There's things that score off of the compost pile. There's things that score off of, you know, how many mountainous region plants you have. You even have, there's even some like animals that are like a communal scoring board where you need to work towards getting, maybe, this eagle needs 8 different mountain cards in your tableau in order to score, and so on. And of course, filling in your map gives you some points as well. There's just so many ways to build points here. There's so many different engines you can create, with these cards, and it's fun. It's fast. It's got some neat puzzles to it, and it feels very different every time because there's just so much to play around with. Next, we have 69 is Dwellings of Eldervale. This is a pretty large box game. It marries Euro-style games of Ameritrash in a very interesting way. There is a communal kind of map that's on the board on a table that slowly grows out of hex tiles as you expand and do more things. You are placing workers out and then workers adjacent to those workers. When you place out a worker, you get to activate, generally getting some resources from this resource tile, or activating some specialty tiles with the goal of trying to turn a worker into a house. So you end up losing that worker permanently, but he becomes a little house or dwelling. And then now that area is considered yours, and it also adds to the combat. So we'll come back to the combat, but once you've got your workers out, you can choose to recall them and bring them back. And this is where they come back, and you can then place them on your tableau of cards that you've collected throughout the game and activate different actions. So there's like a dual phase worker placement. We eventually, we see this in some other games, but it's done very well here. But of course, you only get to do that if you recall them back manually, not if they get murdered. And this is where the fighting comes in and the monsters come in. Eventually, the monsters will start moving around the board fighting your guys, or you'll be fighting your other players. And it comes down to rolling a certain amount of dice, and then it's just whoever has the highest single die value wins, with ties being broken by the next descending die. So you could put in 5 dice and one person has 1, but their 1 die wins of a 6 because you rolled all 5s and below. So in that, sometimes it feels a little off balance, but it just adds to the Ameritrash fun to it. The game's not too incredibly long. It has a lot of cool combos and things you can explore and play around with. in terms of how the different factions kind of make up the game, and you only play with the elements that are present from the factions in the game. So there's a ton of variability there, and a ton of monster variability. And there's a solo mode too, which is slightly different, doesn't play quite the same. Your actions play the same, but the solo does not quite play like a human player, but it still works well. And it is just, there's a ton of variety, ton of content. I would suggest go with the versions that have miniatures. They are more expensive, but at least the shelf space will be worth it because it's the same size box, whether you have miniatures in it or not. So, bit of a problem there. It takes up too much shelf space. And we'll see if this eventually gets supplanted by Andromeda's Edge, which is essentially a new space version of this that's coming out soon. Number 68 is good old classic Werewolf. And this is a large social deduction style game. And by large, I mean like you could easily play this with 30 players. And while it's not the most balanced game, or it doesn't, I mean, it won't work for a lot of players who just, a lot of people just will not enjoy this. I've had many great experiences with this, and it just had to go somewhere on my list. We play Werewolf mostly at camps with scouts. I'm a scout leader, and we're at an age group where they're like preteens and teens, and like at night after they're done around the campfire and cleaning up the campsite and whatnot, they just love sitting around and playing Werewolf. And it's all in good fun. There's bluffing and finger pointing and stuff, but everyone goes home friends in the end and having a good time. And it can lead to storytelling and a little bit of improv and just lots of fun, memorable moments throughout the game. With a good moderator, someone who really knows how to run the game, you don't really need to know very much either. You just, as long as you know to listen, you can run this game with just about anybody, and it will work really well as long as they like that style of game. I just had so many great memories of it, so it's on here, number 68. On number 67, and this is Gloomhaven. In all its varieties, I would probably lump it in together. I have the base box kind of sitting back up there. I've been playing through that solo. I've been playing through Jaws of the Lion with my son, and the world building is interesting, but it comes down to the card play that really gets me. It's the tactical combat where you are carefully moving around the board and doing cool moves to take out cool monsters is where it really shines. And there's a real tightness to the card play because some cards are gone, like they're one-time use, and then they're removed from that round, or rather that scenario, until the next fight. Whereas other cards, once you've kind of run through your deck, you need to take a rest action and then you lose one of them. So you have a quickly reducing deck size of action cards in order to get through this room or this dungeon and fight off all the monsters. You feel cool doing it. Cool things happen doing it. Each of the characters, and of which there are many in the base boxes, and there's 4 in Jaws of the Lion, have a lot to explore and to do, and equipment to get, and choosing which new skills to unlock as you progress. And of course, stickers and things that get added to the maps that change the world. There is just a ton to explore in here. I would highly advise people start off with Jaws of the Lion because there's already just a ton of content in there, and it's a little bit more approachable. And in terms of getting it to the table through its Atlas-style maps, it's just a ton of fun, and probably my preferred dungeon-style game. Number 66 is Paleo, or I guess not Paleo American, this is Paleo. This is that's a really unique kind of cards speculation mechanism, I guess you could call it. So you are essentially, you have a deck of cards, you divide it to the number of players, and then each player takes the top 3 cards and looks at their backs. And you might say like a mountain, a forest, and then a campfire, and think, okay, Maybe if I go to the mountains, I might find some rocks, but at the forest, I might find some trees, but maybe I'll find some food in the forest, whereas the rocks may be more dangerous. Okay, I'm going to go to the forest. And then everyone picks which card they want to visit. The other cards go back on top of the deck. And then you reveal, it's a deer. I can kill this deer for food if I have the right weapons to do it. Oh, I can't, I don't. I don't have the right weapons for it. Hey, my, buddy, whoever you're playing with, you can come cooperatively help me fight this deer, assuming your card is not urgent. And then we have some meat for our growing civilization here, for our colony. And that aspect of you don't never quite know what you're going to get. It might be something good, it might be something bad. Sometimes you're forced to take the bad cards just to get through them. Or maybe you can cycle them in certain ways. But then kind of the real draw of the game is there are, I think it's A to J of different card decks that get mashed up together that tell a story. So I obviously don't want to spoil any for you, and I think I have a playthrough on my channel of one of them. I can do some more, of course. And you know something's happening in your tribe at the start. It might be you're sick, or someone's sick, or you hear wolves howling in the night, and that is your setup and your start. And you need to survive and deal with what's happening in your own little world while also finishing all the cave paintings, which is a sign of progressing through the story and being triumphant over what's happening, while also keeping everybody alive. So it's a tight, fun co-op, both for solo or for multiplayers, and there's just a ton to explore in here. And even once you've learned the decks, mixing and matching them is just going to add more legs to it. Number 65 is Framework. This is the game that famously my wife has probably played 100 times. And, and it is a simple tile-laying game of making connections and routes. And you are essentially drafting tiles from a selection, or in solo, you're just drawing and placing. You can teach this in a minute. And it's just a race to who can complete the most objectives that are also on those tiles. For example, an objective of 5 silver means you need to have chaining from it 5 silver. But of course, some rings can have multiple colors to it, so maybe your silver chain passes around through the gold chain. The gold chain also leads back to a different objective. So it's building that grouping out and then completing those objectives, or in solo mode, restricting yourself to a small play area. Makes for, I believe this is Uwe Rosenberg's, I think this is his best small tile laying game yet. It's the simplest to learn, it's the easiest to play. Setup is literally take the bag of tiles and then you're set up, you're done. That's all you gotta do. All right, next, number 64 is Paladins of the West Kingdom. This is another Garfield game. This is probably the most complex of the West Kingdom trilogy, and it's the second one. And there is essentially there are 3 different kind of strengths, or 3 different banners that you're trying to raise that reflect different things. And each of them represents a different aspect of yourself, I guess, or of your retinue that you're trying to progress. And don't ask me what they stand for, because I don't think it really matters. But they all chain into each other in interesting ways. For example, you can work the blue and the red roots, which gives you the black banner, but the black the black and the red root gives you the blue banner, and so on. They're all kind of cyclically attached to each other in a sense that you really have to work out that worker placement puzzle of where you're going to put your workers and when to trigger different things, to raise different things. You need to have certain minimum caps to get to stuff. There is some starting cards and drafts that you kind of do each round that kind of lean you into certain types of turns. There's ways to upgrade your boards with buildings that make spots cheaper. There's just a ton of stuff to do and explore, different routes to victory to explore. And every time I play it, it burns your brain, but it's just so much fun doing it too. Number 63 is Azul, and that is the Summer Pavilion version. This is, so far, and I've played all the versions currently out there to date. This is my preferred Azul version. In this, you are drafting tiles from a series of kind of factories, I guess they call them, which are just circles where they hold them. The excess get dumped in the middle. You're trying not to get penalized by taking that first middle group. And then you are placing them around in star patterns in these interlocking sections on your board. And what this one does differently than the other Azul game is that if you surround various features like statues and fountains, that gives you access to bonus tiles from the central area. So you can sometimes combo things and get bonuses, which are always a lot of fun. It's just a little bit more flexible because there's a wild color every round, so you can get to what you need to do a little bit easier. And it is just a nice little puzzle that's just very engaging to deal with every time I play. Number 62 is Tiny Epic Dungeons, and specifically the deluxe version, because you gotta have those big chunky monster meeples. This is a very small box for a very big dungeon crawl. There is a ton of characters in here, a ton of boss monsters to go after, lots of rooms to explore, lots of equipment to get, and put on your character. And it also does some very interesting things with how dungeon crawls work in general. Yes, there's dice rolling for combat and things like that, accentuated by your meeples, but you are essentially you're running around discovering, seals and stuff to trigger the boss. And when the boss room arrives, his kind of mat or his board where every boss has a unique board is essentially his lair, and you're fighting him in his lair in different positions, and the layers do different things. But at some point, you can't defeat him until you get him to run back through all the shrines. So you have to escape out of the map and wind your way back and find your way around the board, luring him, stumbling over each of his shrines that are negating his power, making it so that you can then finish him off. This aspect is very unique from any dungeon crawl I've seen, and it makes a cool run and shoot, hide, try to stay ahead of him. The bosses all act differently and do different cool things. You can play a solo, you can play this 4-player. It has actual miniatures, which in this box that size is amazing that they actually look good and fit in the box. And there's just a ton of stuff to explore in here. If you want a dungeon crawl, like a full fat dungeon crawl in a very small box, this is the way to go. And finally, 61 is Res Arcana. This is made by Tom Lehman. He's the same guy who made Race for the Galaxy and a bunch of other games. Course. In this game, you are given to start 8 different cards. You could draft them if you use that variant, but typically they'll be random, and you get a leader. And you are trying to make the best out of those 8 random cards in your leader as you can to race to get enough points to win the game. And in order to do that, you are discarding cards, resources, you are playing them, you're activating them. There's a lot of resource conversion and engine building where, maybe at the start of your round, you get a bunch of resources from different stuff you've played, and then you turn this one sideways to put resources on it, and then convert, then use this one to convert this resource into that resource, and use that one to get 3 more, and then get a monument for 4 gold, which lets you draw more cards, and then you're eventually going to get these large places of power, which there's usually a random selection of them given out or set out at the beginning of the game, and they might lead your strategy. Maybe you want to go for a red element heavy strategy where you need to pump red stuff into this element, or maybe you're going after creatures or pearls if you have the pearl expansion. There is a ton of stuff to do here. If you like efficiency euros and resource conversion and trying to like squeeze every last ounce of goodness from your 8 cards, you can do a surprising amount with those 8 cards, and it makes for a very fun, very engaging game. Even if it is a little heads down, it still flows very quickly as you're doing 1 action each throughout the game. And that is my 61, or rather my 70 through 61 out of my top 100. Please go back and watch the rest if you want to see those. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you would like to see a playthrough of, or you'd feel like a more in-depth review of. Let me know. And thanks for watching. I'm Will, and this is Carper Mass.